latest moves after taking the oath was issuing sweeping executive orders to end diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, all in the name of what he calls meritocracy in the workplace. So what do you think of getting rid of these DEI programs, and do you think he knows how to spell DEI?
So I fall somewhere in the middle on this. I generally think organizations are stronger when there's diversity, but I think it needs to be the whole host of diversity. So ideological, socioeconomic diversity, religious, not just race-based. Not just
based on race.
And I think that a lot of Americans generally agree that diversity makes things better. But I also think a lot of this country thinks, I want the federal government to work. I don't know that I think every agency needs 100 or dozens of employees focused on diversity if you can't get your VA benefits, if you feel like our schools are failing and falling behind, if you think it's too hard to get your Social Security benefits. So I think there's somewhere in between that most people fall. And I will say this, something that I've heard from both MAGA types and then like Bernie bros is DEI to some extent is a professional people problem. If you're working class in this country, if you're in the agriculture sector, if you're in the service industry, you don't even get to have a DEI office.
Is that true, really? Because I remember when I was younger, a black person would have a hard time getting into a union, for example.
Yeah.
That would be blue collar.
So unions do actually tend to have some level of DEI.
I don't know if that's true anymore, but that was true then.
I'm saying in a workplace, this isn't necessarily for a lot of working class Americans the first issue that they're coming up against is how do I make the workplace more diverse, or do we have a DEI officer? It's am I going to get paid on time? Is my check going to clear? Am I going to get enough hours to make ends meet?
Right. I think this is a really important issue, especially because when we're talking about DEI, we're not talking about a DEI office. We're talking about equal opportunity and inclusion across all offices for all people so that it's more reflective of what America looks like. This will specifically harm women, right? And it will specifically harm African Americans and Latinos. So we're not just talking about black jobs.
How about Asians?
It will affect Asians as well. And so I think this is really counter to his campaign promises to protect black jobs, because in the federal government, overwhelmingly, black professionals work there. We're talking about over 16%, more than the black population. And so I think what we're facing here is sort of a second nadir, because Woodrow Wilson, back in the day, did the same thing. He resegregated the federal government, leading to a plunge in income for not only black workers, but also for women. And so what we're seeing is an attack, not on necessarily DEI or wokeness, we're seeing an attack on the very fabric of our company, which is opportunity for all, including women. And women, what Whoopi has said often, women were really the most, they gained the most advantages from affirmative action. And so this is a war on women. I think it's a war on people of color. And what we're going to see is a lot of pain, but especially to those communities that need those jobs.
And also, one community that you didn't mention is the LGBTQ+.
Absolutely.
Look, one of the things he did, not only did he revoke a bunch of Biden executive orders, including one that calls for the negotiation of lower drug prices for people on Medicaid and Medicare. That's going to be very painful for Americans. But he also revoked an order, the Equal Opportunity order signed by Lyndon Johnson in 1965. So not only are we now going back 4 years.
He can sue Lyndon Johnson, maybe.
Well, we're not only, he's not taking us back 4 years.
Yeah.
He's taking us back to 1965 before it was legal for there to be interracial marriage in this country.
That's why it's so broad.
Look, I would love to think, and I hope that we get there one day, I would love to think that there is no racism by the people who do hirings in the government and in corporations in America. But that is not the case. I would love to think that there is no homophobia, but that is not the case. And I think that by getting rid of this and doing it in such a bold way on day one, what he is doing is giving a green light to people who are racist, to people who are homophobic, to people who are anti-women and think they should be in the kitchen, and telling them there is no consequence to your racism.
But one of the criticisms against DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion, all great in theory, but the DEI programs have not accomplished things. They've been a bureaucracy of money suck that have not gotten anywhere. When you say people are threatened, what do you think the removal of DEI is going to do to those people? Because a lot of this is...
I can tell you that, because the removal of DEI actually at this point in time.
Because they're not going to fire
they're not-
people.
yeah, they
They're-
wouldn't
it's
fire
the
people who were
departments of
hired under it.
DEI.
Well, they're not
They
only
have
going to
put them on paid leave.
they put them
starting
on
yesterday.
DEI people.
officers.
But what I'm saying is all the people that work
But they
in the-
also stopped this thing, these ridiculous, what are you call them?
Executive
The
order.
executive orders. What they are doing is also eliminating the protections for discrimination in awarding government contracts. And to be clear, that is going to hurt women. That is going to hurt
But I do
business.
think
I believe in the spirit of this, which is DEI
There's
has
action that supports it. The
At
stats
University of
support
Michigan,
that.
85 million in a 5-year DEI plan. The Black Student Union said 85 million was spent, and yet Black students' experience on campus has hardly improved, and enrollment has gone down. So that's one example of saying
Harvard
that
Law School, the
it's not
enrollment of
just a
Black students
criticism
have
of
gone down.
diversity. It's a criticism of the programs being effective. And the one thing I will say that is,
The
as we
stats show that
push
they're
DEI,
very effective.
that's not what I'm reading. But the point here is that I would also say this all started in colleges and the turning over of affirmative action. I would ask that they immediately address legacy admissions as well. Because if we're talking about the equal opportunity, we need to get rid of legacy
And I do want to
admissions.
underscore one thing, which is this is abolishing existing DEI departments within the federal government, so people who worked in those departments are being put on leave. It is not going back and like, oh, this woman was hired by this officer, so she's losing
The
her
Civil
job
Rights Division
across.
has been put on
Yeah,
pause as well.
but that's, I'm just saying a distinction.
Yeah, but
that
he's,
people
he
aren't-
is, they are going through a purge department by department. They are
Doge.
finding out, you know, who might be doing, I mean, they've been asking people in the different federal departments to basically snitch on each other. You know,
Yes.
who's a liberal, who's a Biden supporter,
Wow.
who's into equity,
Yes, they are.
and they have been, you know, they have been purging those people, which they told us they were
Wow.
going to do. What's one of the first things
That's
he did?
not 1965,
He fired,
that's 1935.
he
Yes, it is.
fired the commandant, the first woman commandant of the Coast Guard. He did that on day one.
Okay.
A woman,
We
not
got-
because she
on
was
day one.
unqualified.
We got to go.
Because he
We'll
wanted
be
to.
right